We're nearly a month after the January transfer window, and I now think it's quite clear to see where Premier League teams are struggling. So I think now would be a suitable time to go through each 20 Premier League teams and talk about a player they should have signed in the January transfer window. Arsenal, Samu Meridian. With Havertz, Saka, Martinelli all being out injured, it's clear that Sterling probably can't do it. And at the moment, the pressure's all on the 17-year-old Ethan Nwaneri. I think a striker would have been a very helpful signing, as Liverpool have been dropping points recently, and Arsenal actually could have had a chance of getting back into the title with only 5 points between them now. I think a striker is needed, and if they don't sign one in the summer, there could be serious issues. Aston Villa's quite tough, as they already have a very good squad, and you talk about depth, maybe a right back, Kyle Walker would have been an option. I mean, I don't know how this man's AC Milan. How was Man City captain 6 weeks ago? And I think that the lack of depth in this position for Villa, despite him having all the sex parties, he could be a very useful player. Bournemouth don't have a fit striker at the moment, and how the fuck is Evan Ferguson sitting at West Ham on loan? A transfer marked value of 40 million, the Cherries probably could have got him on loan or permanently, especially with how good they've been this season. I mean, this one's probably a little punchy, but you'd say Brentford could do with a striker, especially after losing Tony. Sorloth, it's probably reaching, but Sorloth is from Norway, and that's close enough to Denmark, and has 12 goals and 21 appearances for Atletico Madrid this season, after getting less game time after the arrival of Julian Alvarez. Brighton, Branthwaite. Defensive solidity has been an issue for Brighton this season. After a 70 million report of last season for Jarrad Branthwaite to go, I now think interest has cooled dramatically, and he'll be a very good signing for the Seagulls. Chelsea, Victor Boniface. I think the Blues have had a dreadful February and definitely one to forget, with Jackson and Gui also getting injured and Nkunku just dropping stinker after stinker. The need for a quality striker has never been displayed more, and Boniface has 12 games, 7 goals this season, but only started 45% of available games, so he'd be a useful player. Crystal Palace, Jude Bellingham. I mean, Palace have written nothing. They're not going to get Europe, they're not going to get relegated, so Jude Bellingham moving to a club where there's not as much pressure would be good. He's not quite his brother Jude, but he's definitely a good young player who can help push out the old midfielders like Will Hughes and develop further, because Will Hughes is shit. Everton, James Ward-Prowse. When I saw West Ham recalled him, I presumed it would have been to go on loan or to sell somewhere else. I didn't really see him getting in, but he's actually played a fair amount since coming back. However, I think at Everton he'd be perfect, as David Moyes is doing really well as the new Everton manager, and set pieces is their way of scoring, and obviously the best player in the world at set pieces would be a pretty useful addition. Fulham, Chukwueze. I mean, right wing's a bit of an issue. Adama's Adama. Harry Wilson's out for an extended period of time. They were linked with him in January, and I think having a player like that could really help boost Fulham, potentially to even battle to get Europe. Ipswich Town, Bayunder. As Muric keeps dropping stinker after stinker, I think Man United's number 2 could be a useful, or number 1 for Ipswich, even if it was just on loan until the end of the season. I think guaranteeing him minutes and actually having a keeper that can save a shot in between the sticks for Ipswich could be that last little push to potentially help them stay up, although it does look like they're going down. Leicester City, Tilo Kehrer. Leicester clearly can't defend. I think a centre-back that's got Champions League experience and Premier League experience could be a useful addition, as Connor Cody, Wout Faes, Vestergaard really aren't doing enough. I think it'd be almost a no-brainer, especially potentially quite a cheap deal for Leicester to do. Again, it could be on loan to the end of the season. Might just help them push to try and stay up, although I think they will go down. Liverpool, João Pedro. I think Darwin Núñez clearly is the only recognised number 9 at Liverpool, which is an issue because he can't score. So I think João Pedro would be a really good addition. I think Brighton need to push on. The current squad they've got potentially aren't capable of pushing further up the table, but João Pedro is clearly a quality player and should get a big move, and I think he'd fit Liverpool really well. Man City, Koundé. It's clear that Man City need a defender. Jules Koundé is a really top player at Barcelona. Akanji's out for a long period again, so I think signing a centre-back such as Koundé would be really useful. Barcelona always have financial problems, and I think he'd be an asset to a club like City. He can also play right-back, and of course losing Kyle Walker, Rico Lewis not being a great player yet, I think he'd be another useful option at right-back. It's all gone a bit tits up from Nkunku at Chelsea, and also Man United lack options in attack. Only having Garnacho, Ahmad being injured, Hoyland and Xerxes being donkeys. I think Nkunku could be a useful addition. He could play as that wide cam or up front. Probably not up front, seeing how shit he's been at Chelsea, but I think he'd be very useful at Man United as he's got that options, and I think Amorim would be very interested in him, and they probably should have got him in January and should definitely go for him in the summer. Newcastle, Ferran Torres. He's Premier League proven, he's Champions League proven, he's played for Man City, Barcelona, Valencia. I think it'd almost be a no-brainer for Newcastle. Jacob Murphy is not it on the right wing. They sold Almiron in January. Ferran Torres can score, he can assist, he can play up front if needed. I think it'd be a really useful addition for Newcastle. Nottingham Forest, Hwang Hee-chan. Forest slightly lack depth in attack. I mean, he's not quite a Chris Wood kind of replacement, but he could drop in at left wing as a second striker. He's been very good at Wolves, successful, very underrated. I think he was poor at Leipzig, but clearly Wolves have brought the best out of Hwang Hee. And I think, yeah, if he could play at Nottingham Forest as a backup, maybe even start a couple games, he'd be a useful player. Southampton, Nathan Patterson. I think Nathan Patterson's a good young right back who's really flourished at Everton, especially when Coleman's been injured. Kyle Walker-Peters' contract runs out at the end of the season, so it'd be a no-brainer. Southampton are already going down, so I think they want a young right back that was happy to maybe play in the Championship for a year. If not, they'll make a lot of money on him. If not, he'll be a great player when they come back to the Prem. Spurs, Andreas Christensen. Champions League winner Christensen is an unreal player. Maybe not Barcelona's first choice, but Spurs have such a lack of centre-backs. If he could get over the being an ex-Chelsea player, which he probably can because he left on a free transfer, I think he'd be a really useful player for Spurs as they just don't have centre-backs. West Ham, Baleba, I mean, clearly a very quality player from Brighton. I think he'd step into that midfield really well. Rodriguez has flopped at West Ham, so I think having another player that can kind of play defensive but actually is really good at progressing the ball forward would be very useful for West Ham. Yeah, I think he'd be a nice little £40-50 million signing for them. Wolves, Kelleher. They've struggled this season, Wolves, both defensively and offensively. Not with enough goals, they've conceded way too many goals. I think the backup Liverpool goalie would be a great first choice keeper for Wolves. He's young-ish still. They'll easily get money back if he's not good enough for them. I think he'd be a great signing.